All right, so in the last video, we talked about what internal controls were. In this video, we're going to kind of tell you what you need to follow in order to create your own internal controls. Okay, what a company would follow. These are the principles of internal controls. So all these examples that we're going to be talking about later on about, examples of internal controls, they're going to fall under one or more of these principles. And there's 7 of them, so let's go through them. First, we want to make sure it establishes responsibility in some form or fashion. So responsibility is established, so whoever is in charge of it, they assume the responsibility of it, and if something goes wrong, you're able to identify that person to go to that person first. That's one major principle. Another one is we want to maintain adequate records. We want to write down what we need to be writing down. We don't want to be skimping over anything. We want to make sure we're doing what we need to be doing. Third, we want to insure assets and bond key employees. So one, we want to make sure that we have insurance on our assets. So if anything were to go wrong, we would be able to get that money back. So if somebody stole something, if there's a warehouse fire, anything like that, we would be able to get that money back. And then also we would want to bond key employees. Employees that have access to these assets, we want to bond them or put insurance on them as well to make sure if they steal something and we can't get it back from them, we will still be able to protect our assets. And so bonding key employees is like putting insurance on a person and not the asset. So that's the third one. The fourth one, we want to separate record keeping from the custody of assets. Whoever's in charge of keeping up with the assets, I do not want them to be the same person that's in charge of record keeping of those assets, because they can easily steal something because they have the custody of and then write it off as if we sold it or something like that. And I would never know it as the owner of the business. I want to keep those two things completely separate. It would be the equivalent of me saying you take a test and then you grade the test and you give yourself a grade. There's a little bit of conflict of interest in there, and so you want those to be two separate jobs. Kind of piggybacking right off of that one is going to be dividing responsibilities for related transactions. So it kind of falls really with the fourth one. But this one's really saying, okay, what I want to do is I don't want the person who is in charge of giving the permission to buy something to also be the one that does buy it, that also is the one that receives it and is also the one that pays for it. I would like to have 4 different departments. I'd have the PO department, I would have the receiving department, I would have the payables department, I would have all these things are different. That's ideal. And so I want to be able to keep those different. The single biggest example of internal controls falls within those two, the fourth and the fifth one. And that's separation of duties. The example is called separation of duties. And that's just we separate different duties that are related so we can get rid of that conflict of interest. The next one is, and this is probably the biggest one today, is applying technology controls. These can be as big as, iRetina scans or something like that, or as small as a PIN number into the cash register. But these are super important because, again, that's another way of establishing responsibilities. If you're having to put a PIN number into a cash register, then you know exactly who is in that cash register. It could also be cameras. There's a lot of things it could be, but this is really big, especially now with technology becoming more cost affordable for businesses to protect their assets and whatnot. And the last one is we want to perform regular and independent reviews. We want to make sure that our internal controls for our assets are doing what they need to be doing. I'm not wasting money doing something as an internal control that's not really helping. I don't want to just waste money in that. I want to make sure what I've set my internal controls up for, they're actually working. Otherwise, I need to fix them or do different ones. So those are the principles. These are the 7 things that we have to create internal controls up under, the examples of internal controls up under. Appreciate it.